20% of your appearance is what is guiding other people's impressions of you. I had to leave the stage humiliated with no voice at all. What drove this? How did my body betray me? You need to find your personal passion for the topic and let that come out effectively to be a compelling speaker. Introverts tend to rise up in the ranks of best speakers because there is that preparation that's put into it. And I often offer to people, if you don't have imposter syndrome, then you've stopped growing. Emotion precedes cognition. Studies showed that when we receive sensory input, our amygdala reacts to it before the neocortex. People underestimate the power of a pause. And they underestimate it because pause is uncomfortable. So I'm going to say right now, anybody out there that's working with a script, stop. The reality is that AI is actually influencing the way we speak.
Hey, just before we jump into the show, got a little favor to ask you. If you enjoy listening to our podcast, please make sure you are subscribed on the platform of your choice. Spotify, Apple, YouTube, whatever platform that might be. The more people who subscribe and the more people who like and rate the show, the more we give you an opportunity to have some great takeaways. It doesn't take you too long, and it would be a great help to us grow the show. For now, that's it. Enjoy today's recording. Salvatore, thank you very much for joining us from the other side of the world. We're talking about you're sat presently in San Francisco, or just outside San Francisco. So thank you very much for joining us. Do you want to give a bit of background to who you are and your little bit of your history so the listeners know what you're up to?
Certainly. Thank you for having me on. And you know how a lot of people get a little anxious when they have to get up and speak or present or teach. And what I do is I help people overcome their fear of public speaking. My work sits at the intersection between communication, leadership, and integration. So I help leaders elevate their communication strategies so that they can create more genuine connections and lead their teams through more collaboration, inclusive. You asked how I got started. It's sort of, my father spoke at conferences. My mother facilitated events. And so as a child growing up, I'm like, this is going to be my future. And when I got on the stage for the first time, my voice began to pitch so I lost my voice. So I had to leave the stage humiliated with no voice at all. But what happened was I was struck with curiosity. What drove this? How did my body betray me? And that set me off on a path to understand public speaking, starting with psychology, like how is it that we interact, what happens to our brains? And then that drove me into neuroscience, like what are the bits and how does the brain work in terms of understanding communication and what happens when we attempt to communicate. And so for the last 20 years, I've been helping leaders, whether they're getting up in front of the United Nations or standing up in their conference room and sharing their data points, so like how to do it more effectively, how to create that connection. Having a lot of fun with it too.
Sounds such a very different career. What sort of things are leaders coming to you with their challenges about communication? I have to present internally. I have to present occasionally online. Obviously, I'm doing this podcast, right? But and so I've learned to adapt to those situations. But what's the most common thing somebody comes to you? They go, Salvatore, I've got 1,000 people to speak to. I don't know how to do it. Where do you start? Where do you help them?
I love this question because everybody does come with their own unique challenge to it. And so I break down communication into 3 categories. There's content, there's delivery, and there's presence. Content wise, I work with a lot of really smart people that have engineering, scientific backgrounds and can explain data in detail. Audiences don't need that. So we need to learn how to structure the information in a way that's going to actually land with the listeners. Delivery, a lot of people, they emulate who they are around. And if they don't have a dynamic speaker to look up to, they can tend to come off very flat or dry or incongruent with their message, or they stumble through or get nervous when they try to get to the next point or whatever. So we have strategies for that. And then last is presence. And this is where the real work is. because what is it? What are the set of beliefs and experiences that a person has had that informs the way they show up? What do they believe about themselves? All communication is contextual. Who are you talking to? What are you talking about? What's the environment in which you're talking? And so when I'm watching somebody and they come to me and say, I want to get better at communicating, I look at, okay, what is the particular trigger that's causing them to lower their delivery or stumble over their content? Is it because they don't know their audience, they're intimidated by their audience? Is because their content, they feel like they need to know more than they know, or they're afraid of like they're creating too much mitigation? Or is there something about the room, like I can do this one-on-one, but when there's 10 people in the room, I shut down? So we look at what trigger it is that's causing that person to lose their effectiveness, and then we begin working on what the belief is behind that so that they can show up with more authenticity and more presence and really start having the impact that they should be having.
And do you think that goes down to a psychological level? Is it, is it actually a deep-seated, not trauma almost, but trauma might way to describe it, right? You turn around and go, you had to go and stand up as a kid, age 7, and you forgot your words and you cried, and then when you're 47, you're crying on stage. Is it that sort of, you come to that deep level occasionally?
There are two key things, and that's number one, and that's probably the most common one. We've all had some experience where the teacher called on us and we cracked and we felt shame, and we'll never do that again. I'm never speaking up. I'm never doing this. I'm never whatever it is. So in those situations, we need to unpack it. We need to figure out what was the belief that was created from that incident. What's a new belief? What else is true about us? What has changed since then? And then work our way out of that mental cognitive conditioning. The second is there is a societal pressure as well, that we watch what's rewarded and what's not rewarded in a room. When we're watching other people, how they behave, we know how to behave in certain places. And those of us who look a certain way or who show up a certain way have learned that we need to hide a part of ourselves to fit in. And that holds us back from speaking authentically to whoever it is. And that inauthenticity gap is what causes a failure for our information, our incredible insights to actually have influence in the room, because what's guiding it doesn't have the full strength of that person's authenticity. Does that make sense?
It does, because I think one of the things that I do when up on stage is I try to be authentically me. Now, authentically me becomes a little bit of humor, very lighthearted, and sometimes in a professional business sense, that can come across in the wrong way. But
Right.
actually, from my point of view, I feel more comfortable presenting authentically me than trying to be the person I'm not, because then I can actually present in the way that I want to present. So I've had to learn a lot about my journey on presenting for that very reason. And it's a challenge, because you sort of go, I need to deliver this message. But actually, if I work with notes, I don't work with the script, because I can't read a script. So I understand it. It completely makes sense to me, right?
Yeah, I think that this is a very interesting situation, yours, because you grew up watching stages and theater and actors, and you watched performance. And even when the actors and so forth were not performing, they were still kind of performing. They were probably more extroverted, more performative. So you grew up in an environment where it was okay to really just find those other parts of yourself and test and try different aspects of yourself. Whereas people that grow up in a very regimented environment and now are in some sort of corporate environment where they have to stay within this box don't know how far they can push their expression. So I love you've reversed engineered into a corporate environment from the expressive to that. Um, we should start like research on this. I love this.
Wouldn't perhaps go that far, but I think. Do you think that? I think the perception is you look at perhaps some of the people who are really engaging speakers. You see TED Talks. You see a Simon Sinek, for example, the big study. I like a lot of his work and stuff. He's really engaging, and so people think they have to be extrovert. Do you think you have to be really extrovert to be a good presenter?
No, I appreciate this question. I myself identify as an introvert. I'm more analytical. I'm more in my head. I want to think about the question for at least 5 days before I give you an answer. It doesn't take quick speaking. It doesn't. You don't need to be quick on your feet in order to be compelling. What the listeners need is they need connection and engagement. So what Simon Sinek does and what other really engaging speakers do is they start with what I call the principle of you then me. They start by building relevance. They start by hooking your interest with the topic by making it relevant to you, talking about your experience, talking about what you're feeling, hoping for, fearful of. And by doing that, they build a bridge between you and their topic, and then they start infusing themselves. Now, I want to back up a little bit because there is pure charisma, right? We all know what charisma is. Charisma is fantastic, but it lasts for only a few minutes. After a few minutes, people start to watch charisma and be like, yeah, okay, fun to watch, but there's no substance to it. So there needs to be kind of a sparkle. We need to see a person's passion for whatever the topic is, and then it needs to be paired with real like relevance and then real meaning for it to land. I'll give you an example. I have a client who's a CFO for a organization, and she's like, nobody wants to talk about this. Nobody cares about numbers. Like, no, they don't want, they just want to know what the number is and go on. I'm like, well, why do you care about that? And she said, well, to me, the numbers tell a story. When I see it, I can see it. I'm like, tell that story. So the next time she was in the meeting, she explained the story that she was seeing and the numbers and how it goes together. And she kind of got lost in her own like enthusiasm about how this all ties together. And she got feedback, wow, that was the most riveting information about numbers that I've ever heard from her colleagues. So you need to have substance. You need to start with you then me. And you need to find your personal passion for the topic and let that come out effectively to be a compelling speaker like Simon Sinek or whoever you hold up as that.
And if I'm an introvert, I mean, you say you've got personal experience. I would slightly question that given the talks we've had. But the introvert side, how can somebody be an introvert and then still authentically them when they present? Because the introvert would close off, and then they might feel uncomfortable opening up. So how do they balance that, and how do you help that through?
So what I do, and I think what a lot of introverts do, is we know that the environment is built for more extroverted people. And so I need to show up. I need to put myself out there. I need to get my voice in the room very fast. I need to have my voice in the room in the first 5 minutes, called break the seal early. And in effect, I am putting out more energy than I feel comfortable doing, but I know it's a limited time. And I follow, and then this may sound a little crazy, but I follow the prepare, perform, recover cycle. So if I know I'm going into like a podcast interview, I do a little preparation so that I, as an introvert, know like, so what are some of the themes that I want to talk about? What are the things that I want to say? I'm going to perform, I'm going to show up. And then honestly, for the rest of the day, I'm going to be in the woods. I'm going for a hike. I'm going to recover from the output that I'm doing right now by reinstating like my own stability. But an introvert doesn't have to not be themselves, but they do have to show up and present in order for the room to hear and get the insights that they have in their minds. Are you introverted or extroverted? You're extroverted, actually.
You see, I would start as an introvert. I would say I'm introverted, but because if I think, oh God, this sounds like a psychological with my counselor session, but I would say that I would say I started as an introvert, but as a kid, I used to perform music, but I would say I lack some confidence in sometimes in some things. So in a big room of people, I might be a bit shy or a bit more reserved, but my job is in sales, and you're in sales, you can't shy away from stuff. So I've sort of again taught myself how to pull myself out of that. Whenever we do something in work or something like that, it's like we need somebody to present. Oh, Ben will do that. I'm the one who present because I feel comfortable in front of people presenting. So it's a real. Do I tick both? I probably tick both boxes. somewhere down
Yeah,
the middle, you know.
there's a book, Introverted Sales Leader, Michael Pollard, who pretty much identifies the research shows that introverts make the best salespeople because they dive deeper into the relationship. We're less transactional, more relational. So we're diving deeper into the relationship building, which makes better sales leaders. And in terms of speakers, introverts tend to rise up in the ranks of best speakers because there is that preparation that's put into it. There's thoughtfulness behind what's being presented and the way we show up and all that. I'm not putting extroverts down. I love extroverts. I always, whenever I go anywhere, I take an emotional support extrovert with me to do all of the extroverted stuff. And then I follow along and just ride their wave. It's a joy to be around them. And a lot of times, an extrovert will get up and take you along their train of thought to get to their point, which is fun at times, but other times, the introvert is going to stop and think and then deliver a statement that's going to land and it's going to be clear and it's going to be more memorable. So it's a both and. There's advantages to both of it. I think it's fun to be an introvert in an extroverted world and to play one on TV and then go back into the woods and be myself.
I think in today's environment, the world of extrovert, you know, we're on social media is the perfect platform for extroverts. I certainly feel there's a pressure of, you know, doing this podcast and trying to promote it and everything like that. You know, you're seeing people look at clips for a second or 2 seconds and they go, I'm not interested, I'm moving on. So the world we have to now be a much more extrovert world than we perhaps were 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, right?
Yeah, there's you're nailing my trauma right now because I have a book coming out in October, and my publisher is like, "You need to get on Facebook and Instagram. You need to make a presence. They need to be able to find you." And I'm like, "Yeah, no, like it doesn't. Can I just?" No, there is a need to put myself out there at a level I'm not used to. I don't know if you're familiar with Substack. Are you familiar with Substack?
Yeah, a little bit.
I think it's the introverts social media platform because it is a lot more thoughtful, short. Anyway, yeah, I agree. We are living in social media times that require us to put ourselves out there a lot more. And what I do to convince myself to actually make that effort is that it's not about me. When I'm putting myself out there on any of those platforms, I say to myself, this is not about me. This is about my book. This is about my message. If I ever feel like I'm putting it out there about me, that feels weird and just like disingenuous for me. But if I put out my information about my book, even if I share a personal story of like, you know, at the beginning, like my voice cracked when I first tried to public speak. It's not about me. I'm sharing like there's a something I learned from this, and maybe in sharing this with the world through social media, other people like me will have permission to be like, oh, okay, I can do that. I mean, my biggest thing when I did try to do the corporate world for like a year, um, there's trauma. We don't go through that therapy, right? My biggest problem was speaking up in meetings. I wanted to wait until the entire meeting was at the very end after I had analyzed and heard everybody, and then I would share my thoughts. And unfortunately, I didn't have the level of authority in the room to hold back. I was still at a place where I needed to gain visibility and establish credibility, which required that I put myself out there. And so I challenged myself to speak before it feels comfortable. I need to say something, even though it's not a fully formed thought, just to get the thing going and to start that connection with other people.
Without diverting completely, is that not an imposter syndrome though? Is that a I don't feel safe here, I don't feel comfortable here type thing?
You're touching on my favorite topic, imposter syndrome. We all have it. We all are faced with it. Anytime I step outside of my known identity, my brain is going to tell me, oh no, you don't belong here. That's not how we operate. That's not what we do. And the trick in working with the imposter syndrome is to first to name it. Ah, That's what that is. This is the imposter telling me that this isn't who I am. And I've learned throughout my life that it's not entirely true. Second, I need to do something to self-regulate, rewire the body-brain syndrome, like opening up my body, taking a deep breath, making myself feel present will help calm myself physically. And then third, I need to take one small step. I need to do one small thing to create movement. Energy breaks the perseveration. So if I just make, okay, I just need to adjust my table. I just need to say one thing. I just need to make one statement, whatever it is. So those are the 3 steps to work out of the imposter syndrome. But we all need to, at some point in our lives, show up and try on a role that we're not completely comfortable with in order to grow into that role. So it's a little bit of fake it till you make it in that sense. And I often offer to people, if you don't have imposter syndrome, then you've stopped growing. You need to go out there and you need to push yourself into situations that feel discomfort so that you can continue growing in life. Like, embrace it. If you feel the imposter syndrome, say, yes, this is a good thing. I'm growing today. And now let's see where it takes us.
And imposter syndrome, going back to that presenting and as an introvert, that imposter syndrome is really actually helpful. I find it sometimes helpful because I sometimes go into a meeting and go, I don't know why I'm here. I shouldn't be here. I'm not that level. But you go, well, obviously I've been invited to this meeting. I've been invited to do this. They obviously want to hear from me. And that gives me that, it helps me come out that introvert point, which is, so it's a useful tool, right?
That is exactly the question to ask when a person is in the meeting thinking, I don't belong here, but I'm here and they invited me here, or my position requires that I'm here, or I'm part of this meeting in some way. What is my unique perspective here? What am I seeing that nobody else is? If I'm the only woman in the room, like, what am I seeing something different? If I'm the youngest person in the room, like, how is my younger perspective happening? If I've had military background and nobody else has, how does that influence? Like, find what is unique about your own perspective in that situation and let that be the thing that you lead with to share with the group, and people will all turn to you and lean in and want more.
Just going back to the presentation bit, going down that route, when people are putting presentations together, you work, as you said, you've worked with people who do loads of different presentations, different scales, different sizes. What's your biggest sort of thing where you see the mistakes they go? Is it going too much into the granular detail, or is it too much storytelling? What's the good balance between sort of putting that presentation together?
I love this question. I wish I had a single answer for you. It can't be that neat right now. I do work with a lot of analytical scientists, analysts, tech, data-driven people. And so there is a tendency for them to pack in way too much data. And it makes sense in some ways because they don't want to sound glib when they tell you the results of all of the research. They want to give you all of the research first and then tell you the results so that you understand they're not just making this up. The average listener doesn't need all of that information. What they need is the data, but more importantly, they need some sort of metaphor or a visual that'll help them picture it. It's like this. A lot of my clients want to give you the blueprint. Here are all the metrics. Here are all the lines. You can see that the numbers are all correct in here. What the audience wants is a picture of the house. Well, this is what the house looks like. This is the tree in front, and this is what the curtains and the windows look like, and so forth. That helps the non-data driven person conceptualize all of that information. So it's a lot of scaling down the content, making it visual, and then it lands. I do want to say, though, you asked about storytelling. There's really rarely a situation where storytelling is a problem. However, when people in business tell stories, the biggest mistake they make is they start talking about what they did instead of why they did it. People can't always follow what you did until they understand why you did it. That's what's going to hook them. So if you can explain the problem that was being addressed, why this was an issue. If you can create real juice around that before getting into what you did in the story, the audience is going, or your listeners are going to follow the story a lot more.
When they're building these presentations, and are you working with them in a way where they are building them word for word, or are you building them the tools? Are you sort of sitting there going, right, this person has this ability to do this, but they don't have the ability to do this? Or are you sitting there going, right, we need to help you on all these different levels to put this presentation together? Because I said, I work with notes, I don't work with scripts. I can't, if you said to me, Ben, you need to work the script, I go, it ain't going to work.
Well, I'm going to say right now, anybody out there that's working with a script, stop. Don't work with a script. Like, scripts are great if you have a teleprompter and you have the ability to bring it to life. Typically, when people read a script, they become a little bit stilted because they are reading the words word for word, and they don't. So it becomes flat when people read scripts. Also, if you memorize a script, you forget one word, everything else goes down like dominoes. You can't remember it. So scripts are, I don't advise it. Notes are better. Bullet points. Put your idea into an outline and make your own transitions. Trust yourself to make those transitions. But what I love about what you're doing, your question, not a lot of people ask me, like, what's behind the scenes like in doing this? So somebody will hire me to come to Chicago, work with them to prepare for an all hands. It's going to be 60,000 people. They've got to give this presentation. The marketing department has created the script and talking points. The legal has verified that it's okay. The other, the sales team and the engineering team are making sure that everything is good about what they're doing. So we've got like 8 players in the room, and they do a read through of the script for the first time with the CEO. After that, everybody gets their little refinement. Then I work one-on-one with the CEO to put it into their words. You can't just read marketing, comes across like a brochure. I have to put it into their words. I worked with one CEO of a healthcare organization that kept getting tripped up and trying to say the entire acronym out loud. So just say OBGYN. It's fine. We don't need to say all of the different words. Just say OBGYN. That's fine. The little things like that until the script, and then it goes back through the whole feed, gets everybody's approval. Then we'll go up on the stage. We'll have 1 or 2 days of run-throughs. We'll do the tests of the mic, the stage, everything else. And then they'll actually have the event. And then the real fun comes when afterwards we'll unpack it. What worked well? What do we want to make sure we do next year when you do this? And what can we do better next year when we do this? So it's typically a 6 to 8 week process when I'm working with somebody. And then we'll repeat it again the following year.
But you're teaching leaders, right? Skills that they're not just going to need for that presentation. You could come and work. You're going to come and work with me. You're going to help me through this all hands. 60,000 people, great. But it's not done because the next week, I mean, this morning I've seen that Oracle are just laying off 20% of their workforce via an email, which is awful communication. But as a leaders, you have communicating, certainly senior leaders, you're communicating every single day with your staff. So the skills you're learning with you must be transferable to daily communication.
Yeah, which is why in my book, I break it down to principles, strategies, techniques. I'm always teaching principles of communication, and they'll get those as we're coaching together. I'll teach strategies, but I'll teach the strategies that are appropriate for the situation that they're in. The techniques are like little tools that they can keep trying over and over again until they get it into their system. These become muscle memory, so they can reach for them at any time in the scenario. So yes, throughout that process, I'm helping them elevate all of their communication. And so any situation in which they're at, they can communicate with more effectivity.
And when you're seeing communication, what's bad examples? You don't have to name and shame who it is. That's fine.
Oh, let's do it.
I don't have a full legal team on tap to be sued, but what's the, you must see bad communication. You must see bad presenting. What are the sort of the traps you see people fall into? What are the bad things you go, oh, we need to, stop now. We need to solve this.
everybody does have their own unique quirks. I want to call that out. But I will say I'm looking at it from the audience perspective, and what is the audience going to pick up on first? Just like when there's incongruence between the message and the delivery, people hear it, they see it, and everything else drops. Trust drops. Like, I don't know if you've ever been on a meeting where the Zoom starts, everybody's in the meeting, and the person goes, I'm really glad to see everybody today. I'm very excited about our presentation and what we're going over. And so let's get to, it's like everybody in the meeting is like, yeah, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. You're saying the words don't match. And this is, I tell all of my clients, you get to say the word excited once in your presentation. That's it. Excited is so over, how, count it today. Listen to how many times you hear people say, I'm so excited. I'm excited to be here. I'm really excited to share. Like, no, this one, I have one client, she came on me like, I'm really excited to be giving you the numbers today. I'm like, there is zero excitement in your face. And that incongruence creates a trust gap. People stop trusting the rest of your message because they just think it's being phoned in, or you're talking from a script or something. Like that is the biggest challenge. There needs to be congruence. If you're not, we live in an age of AI. If you're going to send them a wonderful PowerPoint presentation or a wonderful proposal or an email, great, let them read it. But if you are going to take the risk of bringing that message to life with your body, with your voice, then do so congruent with how it feels and how the meaning, you're giving meaning to it. Bring it to life in a way that's congruent with what you're saying.
I'm assuming you'll probably say yes, but do you think you can teach that presence? I interviewed somebody recently who was working in the events industry, who provides dancers and singers to performances. They've done 3 years of drama school. They've done that so that you can learn it. But do you think for business people who can't go and do 3 years of training, can you teach somebody to have that authenticity? Or do you think there are some people who just can never get it?
It's a both and. Yes, you can teach it, and yes, it may take time. The number one is helping them find the passion in what they're talking about, first of all. Sometimes that isn't there, or they feel that they believe that the audience doesn't really care about the topic. Well, make them care by the way you care about it. But the second part of it is being in the body, not the mind. If I'm up here, my script is up here. So if I'm wanting to give you the word for word script, that means I'm going to appear up here. And you can hear it in the voice. You can hear when a person's voice is up here in the voice. You can hear when a person's voice is in their throat. And you can hear when a person's voice is in their body. When a voice is in their body, that tells me that their message that they are delivering with their entire body. So simply by working with the voice, you can help a person start to embody their message and deliver it in a way that actually connects with their listeners.
I've sat in town halls. I won't name my bosses because I think they might listen. But I sit in some of the town halls and listen and go, whatever. And then I listen to others and I go, okay, I'm really listening to this. What do you think makes a leader allow that message to stick, to make me as a listener, whether it's town hall at work or it's outside, what makes it actually stick with us as listeners?
There's a couple of things that I have, but of course I want to ask you, like, what was it that made one person's resonate more and stick than the other?
So I think I was bought in the first 20, 30 seconds. I think it comes back to that point of going, hey, I'm really excited to be here today. It's really good. Do you know what I mean? That's for those who are not watching on YouTube, face down, not looking at the camera, all that sort of thing. So, do you know what I mean? It's that having grown up in professional performance, stage presence. When an actor walks on the stage, I want to be captivated by that actor or that dancer or that singer. So for me, I suppose that's my tick box that I go, oh, okay, I'm on stage, that person I'm captivated by. That's probably, if you ask me, that's where I go.
Emotion precedes cognition. MRI studies show that when we receive sensory input, our amygdala reacts to it before the neocortex, which tells us that when we watch a person come onto the platform to speak, stand up to speak, or start speaking on their virtual screen, we are taking in thousands of micro expressions, thousands of little inputs, and processing them emotionally of how much we trust or don't trust. And then we will begin to look for reasoning to validate our feeling based on what they do end up saying from that. So that was a very heady answer, but what I would offer is I've watched several people who will, to your point, anybody not listening, I will describe it. They will walk in with their head down, thinking about their thought. And then as soon as they get to the podium, they will look up, smile, their face starts with warmth and beaming, and hello, everyone. And it's like, we saw you walk in. We know that that was fake. That was engineered. It's like, how are we going to trust anything else? So I would offer that the way you're describing this town hall, the person who is showing up from the beginning as having presence, they appear present, they're connected with you, their eyes are open, they're looking around, they are tuning in. You can tell that they are connected even before they start speaking. You're going to listen to and hear their words in a different way than the person who is looking for their notes or looking for that right note on their screen and then reading to you from that in a way to convince you of the rightness of the message because they have it all here. And like, if you follow the rationale, surely you will agree with me. It's like, yeah, I'll agree with you, but there's something I'm not connecting with here.
How much do you think is down to sort of how you're dressed and how you're feeling as a person? I feel, again, in this corporate environment, sometimes I don't feel, it comes back to that imposter syndrome. I'm perhaps feeling not confident in what I'm wearing. Do you work on that side of things with people? Because, I wouldn't go and present in a suit and tie, even if I had to present to the highest person in the land. Well, I might put a tie on, but do you know what I mean? That's not me as a person because I'm not authentic. I'm not going to do t-shirt and jeans, but, you've got to feel comfortable, right?
Yeah. Number one, always aim to be the best dressed in the room. That way it will reduce your own inner imposter feeling like I don't belong here. Like if you're better dressed than anybody else in there, you don't have to question whether or not like you've dressed appropriately for the thing. But there's research out there, and I apologize, I can't remember her name. She worked at Google. She did a whole research for years on that aspect. 30%. 30%, well, it's 28%. 28% of your appearance is what is guiding other people's impressions of you. Your credibility, your authority, 28% of that is based on your appearance. And it's not just the way you dress. It's how your hair is it done. It's are you fit or not fit? Are you sitting up with a posture? Your presence accounts for 28% of your listeners' sense of your authority and credibility on whatever you're talking about, which does inspire people, I think, to spend a little time getting a little polished. I mean, I'm in the Bay Area right now, and I started my communication coaching here. And I don't know if you know, like tech environments like are notorious for like, just wear your sweats. It doesn't matter, right? It's hard for somebody who is about to give you $1 billion on your next funding round to take you seriously if you're wearing sweats. And it has nothing to do with like you not being a great person, a smart person, and being able to drive that forward. It's just that 28% is causing a little bit like, I'm not so sure about that. So
yeah, I mean, I think back to the film The Social Network. I know it was made a little bit for Hollywood and everything like that, but the Mark Zuckerberg character going in a dressing gown and t-shirt to get funding because he just went, well, we're Facebook, you can fund us or not. It's a different mentality, but if you are completely right about how you put yourself across is so key to what you're portraying. as a leader. You know, you work with all these leaders all the time and on different scales and things. How do they translate to their day to day? You know, leaders day to day have difficult conversations with people. You know, you make people redundant, you're telling them off, you're guiding them, you're helping them. How do you sort of help those skills work on a day to day basis?
There is a need for any leader to be able to compartmentalize what they're going through, because they have circles, right? The inner circle is going to see them at their most raw. They have built that trust, the psychological safety to say the offhanded comment, and that then there's the next circle and the next circle and so on. And a good leader is mindful and intentionally goes into every engagement with, what do I want to get out of this? And what am I taking into this? So I have a goal in mind and I have an intention that I'm bringing forward to that environment. With that sort of mindset, they can show up the way that is needed in that situation from that. How does it translate? 100%. I think one of the biggest ahas a lot of my clients have is just simply bringing that intentionality. There's a point where your work doesn't just speak for itself. You have to speak for your work. And as you begin to do so, you realize that I can't just present it this way. I need to present it in this way. And it keeps growing. And eventually, that intentionality, what almost becomes a mindfulness practice in communicating with people, starts to layer throughout their lives. And I always say, if you're going to learn to elevate your communication, you want to do it in low stakes situations. Practice with the barista when you go get a coffee. And then when you get into the office, then you can try that. Well, I was thinking, right? And you know, because you've watched the barista's face, like at some point, like that becomes a little too like bombastic. You need to bring it back a little bit, right? Or whoever it is, the cashier, whoever it is you're working with, you get that feedback and you're like, oh, I can hold a pause for about 3 to 4 seconds before that person starts to wonder if I've lost the thread. Okay, good, right? So you practice in these low stakes situations, and then when you get into the office, you can soar.
It's really interesting you say that. When I started to move more into sales, one of the things I felt very introvert. We talked about that a little bit, but I went at restaurants. If the waitress or the waiter came to me, or I was at a bar, I would make the effort to have a little bit of a conversation. I'm not yet quite at the place where, even now, where I can strike a, you know, in a train station, go, oh, hi, nice to meet you, and all that sort of level. But if you're interacting with somebody, I would just go, there's the bill. Oh, thank you very much. I'll go, there's the bill. Oh, thank you very much. It's been great service. Have a little bit of chat. And that really helps me in further communication. It's a small learning.
It's such a good thing. And there's two things about what you're saying I want to call it. If you are going into a networking event or you're going into a situation where you need to communicate, take as many little opportunities that day on the way to. Like, take that first cut, talk to the taxi driver, talk to somebody in the lobby, whatever it is. Like, you want to have that first sort of rejection out of the way. So you start to balance and you grease the wheels for that. But I'd like to offer a continuum of behaviors to practice. And that continuum is from agency to relational. Now, there's Power and Influence by a Professor Grinfeld from Stanford explained that we all exhibit behaviors. We know how to behave in certain situations, and we've been conditioned to behave certain ways. Problem is, our conditioning doesn't always match the environment that we're in. So being intentional about the behaviors we're exhibiting when we show up can help us really change how we're interacting with people. So you got agency. The high agency is the person who is, all right, yes, okay, we'll do that. Right? They're coming with such authority and such strength and such conviction that you can't help but listen to them. They must be right. And you've got the high relational, right? You've got that kindergartner teacher that is so like effusive and warm and engaging and creating space for you. that whole continuum, we all have the ability to spread that range. And most of us are conditioned to react, to reach for a certain behavior based on the environment, based on the topic, based on the person that we're talking to. And that knee-jerk reaction is not always the best. So to your point, and this is what kind of sparked me, I started doing this with waiters. Like with the waiter, I don't know why, but I want the waiter to like me. I don't want them to spit in my food, right? So I always I go high relational when I'm talking to a waiter. Oh, like, how's your day? Oh, this is great. Like, what do you like here? I want them to like me. And I was like, I'm going to try it the opposite way. I'm not going to make eye contact with them. I'm going to have a very convicted voice. I'm going to be using more of my full body voice. And I'm going to say, well, I'm going to have this. Can I get that without this? Wonderful. And then I'm going to just, for me, it felt so dismissive. It felt so alarming to treat someone like this. You know, what happened was those waiters were kissing up to me by the end of the meal. What else can we bring you? Was that good? How is it? Like, they were checking on me 10 times more than the one that I was friendly with. And so I started to watch, and again, a low stakes situation. If I adjust my behavior on this continuum, how does the people around me react? And once I had learned what behaviors I wanted to try out in a work situation, I started dropping simple things. And I'll break this down into 3 areas: space, silence, stillness. A person of high agency takes up a lot of space. They take up a lot of space. They spread their stuff out. Their shoulders are back. They're taking up a lot of space in the situation. When you get into the conference room, they've taken up 3 spaces just with their little stuff. The person of high relational, they are not taking up space. They're trying to make themselves small so that you can expand. Let's be clear one thing here. There's a need for the entire continuum. If I need to lead my team through a very difficult change, I need to be in high agency. If I need to convey to my team that we need more from them, that we failed here and we need to get better on this, I might go into high relational to create that psychological safety or that sense of comfort or ease for them. So we need to use the whole range. One is not better than the other, just so we're clear on that. So space. Second is silence. Some people probably think that the audio just dropped, but I was holding a pause. Leaders that are using high agency are comfortable with silence. Leaders who are uncomfortable will break that silence first. So get comfortable with the pause. We can talk about the pause later. And last is stillness. Stillness. So we have space, silence, stillness. Last is stillness. And with stillness, that means that a person in high agency is going to use very deliberate gestures. They're going to hold their posture more erect, not stiff, but more erect. A person in high agency is going to use more gestures. They're going to use more gestures around their face. They might even touch their face a little bit. That's relational. So space, silence, and stillness. Practice today. Anybody listening, pick one thing. Recognize, number one, what is your go-to behavior in that situation? Do you automatically go to a sort of collapsed and inviting relational behavior when you're in front of that person? What would happen if you chose instead to go into more of a taking up space in that same situation? See what happens. Observe. Become intentional about what behaviors you're bringing to that engagement, and it'll change everything about the way you are showing up and your influence within your organization.
I want to come back to the silence point because I've got an interesting discussion thing I want to have on that. But I was listening to a podcast the other day about a British Army general, and he was like, "We have to tell the soldiers, talking about young soldiers coming in, we have to be really, this is what you have to do." And because that's the environment, you can't imagine them not being in that environment with the relaxed and chilled because they're on the ball line and all like that. But it's interesting you sort of saying you have to adapt it, because I think if I turned to my team, and some of them I know listen, if I turn around to them and it was like completely that way, they'd be like, what's been on? What's happened to him today? And I think you have to still be authentic to you. It's a really interesting point, but you still have to be authentic to you when you're doing that, because otherwise people will just not believe it or listen to it because it's not
It's
me. Do you know
it's
what I mean?
true, and this is another reason to practice in the low stakes situations until it feels authentic, because you're practicing something outside your normal conditioning, and until it feels authentic, people will be like, so are you okay today? Do you need a sandwich? Do we need to get you a Snickers bar? Like, you're not yourself. Yeah.
Onto this silence piece. I worked with a sales guy many years ago who was like, whenever you, as a sales guy, if you're doing, if you keep silent, whoever the first one to break the silence loses the sale. And
It's
it's an interesting thing to, silence is so powerful in communication, but in just in life as well.
I was getting a gym membership. I don't know if anybody's gone through that process, but there's a whole bunch of fees that they charge you when you join a gym. And I I'm an analytical person. So as the person, I was like, so there's this fee and that fee, and I'm like, wait, what is that fee? And genuinely, I was just trying to understand analytically, how does this play out? But because I had asked and I stayed silent, oh, we're going to take that fee off. He ended up, I got that gym membership. He was practically paying me to go to that gym because all I did was hold silence. And literally, I was just trying to understand and trying to do the math in my head of how does this all go together and what would the gym do with this and why would that be there? It convinced him. So yes, the person who breaks the silence first is the one who has lost the negotiation. But I want to be clear, that's not throughout the entire negotiation. That's just at the climactic moments that you need to hold the silence. If you, as a negotiator, are not allowing some of your cards to be seen, are not sharing a little bit, there won't be any sharing from the other end. So it's learning when to hold the silence that is critical.
And taking that silence to presenting and presentations, how do you like to build a journey? Because we talked about it a lot through this podcast about that journey of presenting. When do you think a silence is appropriate? How do you use the silence to tell that story or get that bit of the story across?
People underestimate the power of a pause, and they underestimate it because the pause is uncomfortable. Here's the solution. Don't pause at the period or the comma, because people anticipate that pause and they think that you're either done talking or that's the opportunity for them to interject in that moment. So you will get interrupted. Practice pausing where it's not expected. Practice taking an anticipatory pause. Deliberately pausing before or mid sentence, mid phrase, so that the audience knows that you're not done and they have to wait until you finish what you're saying. Practice holding that pause. That's when you start to build the muscle for holding a pause. And then you can hold a pause later. You build a reputation as somebody who holds pauses in silence so they won't interrupt you when you do pause at a period or a comma. But until you master the anticipatory pause, the other parts get a little bit funky. My offer to anybody who is planning, I'm using air quotes, planning to pause somewhere in their presentation is to pause before that point that they want to land hardest. Oftentimes that's the ending. Oftentimes it's the beginning. There's the law of primacy, law of recency, and law of frequency. The first thing you say, the last thing you say, primacy and recency, are going to be the things that last longest in your listeners' ears. So spend a little bit more time planning what are the first words you're going to say, what are the last words you're going to say, and where can you put silence in there? Law of frequency is the thing that you say most often. What's the phrase that you're going to repeat throughout your talk? so that your audience walks away with that sort of echoing in their mind. And that might be the point that you practice your pause. So if I was going to plant a pause in a presentation, it would be one of those three areas.
If somebody has listened to this, what's the one thing that you would say to them? You know, they go away and go, oh, do you know what? I wish I was better at this. What would you say is the one thing they can help themselves to be a better communicator? That could be presentations, that could be in life, that could be whatever. But is there a sort of a one ticket you would start as a starting point with somebody?
You then me is where I have to go with that. Start every conversation, every response, every reply, every answer to a question, every talk that you're giving by talking about the other person, their perspective, what's going on in their world, their hopes, their fears, what they want out of life, the situation, their work world, the topic that you're talking about. Start by talking about them to build that bridge before you get to your topic or to you or your agenda. And that will inherently make you a better communicator all the way around.
And on the flip side, what should they stop doing?
Stop caring what other people think. In the sense that too often times we are worried about being judged as a speaker. And I follow the rule of not about me, because it's not about me. When I'm speaking, it's not about me. It's about my message. It's about my listeners. If I make it about them, if I make it about the listeners, it doesn't matter if my hair is messed up, if I flubbed a few words, if I said the wrong thing and had to correct myself. None of that matters. It's not about me. It's about them and the topic and me connecting the two of them together.
I think it's really interesting you said about that, fluffing the words. When I do a speech, I get so worried that at the end I go, oh, I screwed that bit up. And I try not to let it worry me in the middle of the speech, because if you do, you've lost the rest of it. But it's something that still plays on my mind. I go to bed, I can give a speech at 9 o'clock in the morning and I can go, oh, still at 7 o'clock at night, I can still be annoyed by it. How do you, I suppose it's the case of just, you have to move on. You just go, that's part of giving a live speech with no script, and it's the authentic you, right?
It's not even just part of it. It's what people want. People want humanness. I don't use ums unless the person I'm speaking to has ums, because it makes me more relatable if I'm using the same mitigating and filler words that person is. So I use ums intentionally. If I was talking like to a bunch of, teenagers or like social media influencers, I would probably be using more of that lingo. It's about being intentional. Messing up a word, making a mistake, flubbing the word, saying the thing that's the wrong thing and going, it makes you human. And people want that. Right now, AI is poised to start taking over a lot of entertainment. I watched a short film yesterday, and it wasn't until afterwards I found out that it wasn't actual actors. It was all AI generated. I was astounded. AI hasn't learned how to put those natural human errors into it. So you getting up and speaking and making a mistake is often refreshing to another human. Like, oh, okay, they're human like me. I can relate to them a little bit better. So embrace the mistakes. But the biggest thing you don't want to do is apologize in the moment. You don't need to apologize. Simply correct yourself and go on, and that's better.
And you talk about AI. I think every one of the podcasts, bar one recording so far, I've talked about AI at some point. It's come in. What do you think that's going to do to presenting? Right? Because as you've just used, you've just watched a clip. Whereas that I talked with somebody the other day, and they were like, "We do all these things, but actually, we don't need to do that in 5 years' time." Where do you think communication goes in 5 years' time as a presenter, and how do we as an world adapt to that?
So let's just start podcast number 2, starting right now. Big topic here. The reality is that AI is actually influencing the way we speak. There's research that shows that we as humans have started speaking more in the ways that the LLMs are putting output to us. So, number one, we are being influenced by AI in terms of our communication in more ways than a lot of people realize. And that to me is a little bit alarming. Where I landed with the AI is this: let AI help you write the email, write the talk, write the presentation. Let it help you, but then back up and put it in your own words. But where the difference is always going to land is that AI can't emulate a human in terms of bringing the true breath of humankind into the meaning of a word or a phrase. A rose is just a rose. AI will never be able to convey that with the same sense of a human can. So don't worry about AI writing the emails and these things, and it'll get better at that, and great. When you have to speak, which you will have to do, that's your opportunity to bring your humanness to it and work with your voice, work with your body, work with the techniques and strategies to make your content more sticky with listeners, so that no matter what AI is doing to support you, you are still the star and it is a backup singer.
What's sort of the one belief about communication that you think is wrong? So it might be a perceived one that it's all got to be, polished to an nth degree, or something. That might be an example we've talked through. But what do you think? Is there one that you think is actually inherently wrong, that everyone gets wrong or has a wrong perception of?
There is a cultural belief that the first one to speak, the fastest speaker, is going to win the argument or whatever it is in a meeting. And that's wrong. And I think that as people in meetings and in business look back, they realize that that person who's the first to speak is not always the one with the most meaningful information. I offer to leaders, if you're leading a meeting, the best rule of thumb is to wait 10 seconds after you put information out there. Find a way to hold 10 seconds before eliciting responses to allow everybody to think through their first iteration and then contribute at a much higher caliber.
And this podcast is called the Business Takeaway Podcast. I always end with this sort of question, right? What's your one golden rule? You work with leaders, you work with presenters, you work with everyone. You've worked with such a broad spectrum of people. What's your one golden rule that if somebody came to you, Salvatore, tell us your one golden rule that you sort of either live by, work by, or communicate by?
Spot it, got it. If you see somebody doing something amazing, the fact that you can spot it means that you have the capacity and you got it. Just takes the courage to get up and try it.
Sunday. You've listened to a few of the pods. You've told me that off let air, which is very kind of you to have listened. As you know, we finish with some quick fire questions. If you've listened to them, you'll have heard the questions, so you might have a heads up. But I'm going to ask you, Apple or Android?
I'm Apple, and it's not always a romance that I love.
Okay. Social media wise, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok.
I'm sorry. Social media, I use LinkedIn and Substack.
Beach or city break? And I must say, you call yourself a digital nomad, which we haven't even touched on this. So you probably have all of these different things in that.
Can I say forest?
You can say forest.
Good.
It's not there on the list, but we can.
I don't know what to do. I get to a beach and I'm like, huh. I called my friend. I'm like, you have to teach me how to beach. I'm here. I don't know what to do. It's just lost.
And you might get a similar answer. Live in a town or country?
When I was younger, I loved towns. New York City, Los Angeles, love it. But now that I'm in my years, I prefer the smaller villages outside.
Would you prefer to travel first class, or would you save the money?
My life is travel, and what I would offer is that you can always travel first class if you got the points or figure out how to make the connections. So you can be budget first class. Budget first class. That's how I would say it.
That's it. Points mean prizes, as I say to my friends. Are you a morning or a night person?
Morning all the way, 4 a.m. And I love the morning more than anything.
Exercise, do you enjoy it, or is it not? Is it important? Is it not important?
I do enjoy it, and I do believe it is important. I have a morning routine, and I stick to it religiously.
And just going slightly off tangent, when you're speaking to your speakers, do you sort of encourage that breathe? Do you sort of do that physical work as well with them?
The body is maintaining all of that energy, and if you don't find a way to expel it, it's not good because it'll come out in your voice. It'll come out in ways you don't want to. So yes, you need to exercise the days of. You need to sleep well. You need to be well hydrated. You need to be well fed before, if you want to be at your optimum for speaking in that meeting or on that stage, you need a routine that's going to get you there. So, and then backstage before you go on, or in the lead up to that meeting, go for a walk, get some movement so that you release some of that extra energy.
Would you rather innovate or would you rather improve?
So this is what confuses me a little bit. If I'm innovating, aren't I also improving?
You are, but I think improve is like, you do 2-3% year on year. We're going to improve this a little bit, improve this. Innovate is going,
Oh,
hey, this is a really good idea. We're going to rip it up. We're going to start again.
Burn it down and start over. I'm all about innovation. This is partly why I'm like a nomad.
Would you rather challenge the status quo or not to challenge?
I would always challenge.
And I'm at a bar and I'm buying you a drink. What is your drink of choice?
My current passion is bourbon. I'm fascinated by all the different kinds of bourbons. So give me a bourbon on the rocks.
Do you know what? I think I should do a pinpoint of who wants bourbon, because bourbon, all my American guests I've interviewed all said a bourbon. So this is a thing.
4 years ago, if you had asked, it probably would have been mezcal. Like we rode this mezcal wave, and now we're riding this bourbon wave right now. I don't know what's going to be next. Maybe champagne? See.
We'll see. Salvatore, it's been absolutely a pleasure. I had 100 more questions to ask, so maybe we have to do this all again at another point, right? But thank you for joining this morning. It's been really fascinating. So many lessons on presentations that I know so many people take something away from this. So thank you so much for joining, and we'll hopefully perhaps do another one.
I would love that. Thank you all so much for listening, and thank you so much, Ben.
So many great takeaways from Salvatore's talk there. We talked about many topics around presenting, how to carry yourself on stage, and just about leadership. It was a really in-depth talk, and we talked about off there doing possibly a second one as well, because there were so many things I still wanted to ask him about it. But I hope you enjoyed listening to that as much as I did interviewing. Salvatore does have a book coming out, and there's information on that at the bottom of the show notes. So you can go and have a look further on that. There are many other fantastic episodes and fantastic guests that we've had on the show. So I would implore you to go and have a listen to some of those. There are lots of different takeaways that you can gain from that, learn from. Please, if you already are not subscribed to the show, please do give us a follow. We've got some more fantastic guests coming up, and if you are following us, you'll get the first notifications of that. If whilst you're there, you would like to give us a review, more reviews help us get further coverage and help us gain more guests on the platform. Anyway, it just leaves me to say thank you very much for listening today, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.